Handwriting video number 6, the cycle of teaching a handwriting unit. In this video, we will focus on the first 2 steps of the cycle of teaching a handwriting unit. The steps are, number 1, introductory lesson in which the teacher introduces the motor programming of a letter using the sandpaper letters. Number 2, directed practice in which a teacher guides the student in the correct letter writing using a whiteboard or a write and white box strip. The 2 aspects that we will not focus on this video but in the next will be number 3, independent practice, the student completing a workbook unit on his own, and number 4, an assessment by the teacher to determine if the child could independently do the letter correctly all by himself. The first step, the introductory lesson, begins with the introduction of how to make a letter using the sandpaper letter. It's important that the child be placed at the table in a way that will ensure success of the learn unit. This means that if I was a right-handed teacher, I would make sure that my student was sitting on my left. I would not have my student sitting on the right because if I did so, my hand would be in the way of the child properly seeing the sandpaper letter that we will be using in the lesson. I also would not want the student to sit across from me because it would be very difficult for the child to imitate my movements if he is seeing it in the opposite form. So after I have my child seated next to me, the first thing we will do is our proper posture exercises to be prepared. We will make sure that the child also has already a proper finger grip and already understands proper placement of the paper. I'll begin by using the letter A from the sandpaper letter box. And remember, according to the order of the letters, A is the second letter we are teaching the child. So M would be the first, A is the second. If we ever forget which order the letters should be in the sandpaper box, we could look on the back where they should be numbered, or look on this card as a way of knowing. First, we invite the child. Today we're going to be practicing writing the letter A. Remember that we always start our letters at the top. Show me how to put 2 fingers together to make what we call your magic writing fingers. I would watch the child, make sure that my child has the 2 magic writing fingers, and then now I'm going to model for the child how to make the proper A. Again. Now it's your turn. When I hand the sandpaper letter to the child, I need to make sure that I place the sandpaper letter in correct paper placement in front of the child, which means it would not be like this, but rather like this, if the child is right-handed. And the child then will take his writing fingers and make the proper letter formation. If I, as a teacher, see that the child is not doing it correctly, I could say, again, watch me. Now it's your turn. The child practices, and I'm making sure as a teacher that I do not go to the next step unless the child is properly using his 2 fingers, going from top to bottom, and making sure that the programming is correct. At this point, I will now introduce how to make the letter A on a small whiteboard with Zeta Closer paper. For this activity, again, since I'm using the whiteboard as a way of simulating my paper, I will show the child how I take my pen and I start my letter at the top and make 5 letter A's while putting a finger space in between each letter. Good. Now it's the child's chance to make 5 letters with correct motor programming. Again, I make sure that the board is placed in front of the child properly, and I also make sure that there is a beginning dot where the child will put the pen to begin each letter. Good. Now you make 5 letter A's. After each letter, I am making sure that the child does not go above the dotted line for the top of his A, does not go below the red baseline for his letter A, that his rounded part of the A is round, and that the stick part is straight. I also want to make sure that the letter A has a nice rounded shape and is not squished like this or irregular like this. I have an opportunity as the child is doing each A to have the child evaluate how well he made the A. After each one, I could say something like, oh, that was so great, but on the next A, let's see if we could keep the A below the dotted line. I might even put my finger there to prevent the child from doing it the second time. Each time the child makes an A, we look at it together, we determine if it is below the dotted line, above the red line, if the sticks are straight, the rounded parts are round, and the shape of the A is made properly. This opportunity of directed practice ensures that by the time the child goes away from me as a teacher to actually work in a workbook, that he's had proper chance for me to give him feedback and to understand what he's looking for when making the proper letter A. After we're finished, we put away the whiteboard, always making sure that the child wipes it clean. And we now could take out our next material that can help us practice writing the letter A properly. This is called a write and wipe off strip. With this strip, again, I'll be using a whiteboard marker. I will be tilting it to have proper letter positioning, and I will be putting my pen on the dot of the letter to show where I begin first. Now, the benefit of using these wipe-off strips is that there are arrows that show exactly what the order of the motor programming is for the letter. So if a child has had any difficulty doing this on the whiteboard, he could then practice much more on one of these strips. If not, if he's doing fine with the whiteboard, you don't even need to do this step. You could simply skip on to something else. Children that you know in general have a hard time acquiring new letter programming could go straight to this activity first before the whiteboard. But the whiteboard allows children who want to go faster and accept the letter very easily to go forward without a lot of sitting with the teacher. Again, I will now take my pen. 1, 2, 3. I'm looking for the child then to also make a letter A, just like I did. What I'm looking for in this step is to make sure that the child is making all of the lines within the clear part of the letter, that the child is making straight lines, rounded curves where rounded curves are supposed to happen, and that the child's understanding the proper sequence. For example, with the A, we do not start with the stick, we start with the rounded part. After we finish doing this, if the child then does seem to understand, the next step would be to go back to the whiteboard and see if the child can do it on his own on the whiteboard. This step of making sure that a child could make 5 proper letters on a whiteboard with proper spacing and proper programming must happen before a child goes away to do independent practice in a workbook. Otherwise, you may be ensuring that the child will have difficulty later and will have to come back and repeat workbook work more than once, which no child wants to do.